Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Going to spend some time with Lee Kaplan, and always enjoy my time with him. He's with the law firm of Smizer, Kaplan, and Veselka, which you can learn more about them at skv.com. He is a phenomenal lawyer and a great resource to The Price of Business, as well as my column over at Huffington Post. And I always enjoy having you on the program. How are you, Lee?
Great. How are you this morning?
Very well. Kind of tell us what SKV is all about.
Our law firm does litigation and arbitration. That, of course, includes appeals. And we handle all kinds of civil lawsuits other than essentially divorce cases. And we do white-collar criminal work as well. In the last 3 months, we added two really fine white-collar criminal defense lawyers who, in fact, are defending Captain Kaluza, one of the people in the BP Deepwater Horizon case.
Very interesting. And tell us a little bit. I thought we would focus today. There's a lot of talk always about should we go through arbitration, should we go through mediation, and a lot of people use those terms synonymously, and they're not really the same, are they?
No. Mediation is essentially something where the parties get together, usually with an experienced lawyer or former judge who has no connection to the case, and the judge or lawyer, the mediator, essentially does shuttle diplomacy in offices trying to get a case settled. But the cases that are mediated are usually actual lawsuits in the courts. Nobody's forced to settle at those, but frequently people get to air their grievances. This neutral mediator gets to show both sides some of the weaknesses of their cases, or bring to light to one side some of the concerns of the other side that perhaps the lawyers who are acting as adversaries haven't communicated that well or haven't registered with the clients. But that's a situation in which the parties come to a final settlement with help, but they're not forced to. An arbitration is an alternative to actual trials in the courthouse, and many contracts have arbitration clauses in them. And in that situation, the parties, one way or another, have a process for selecting one or three arbitrators, and the case is presented to them, and they make a binding decision. It's not a settlement, it's a binding decision. Now, both of those are called ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution. That's sort of the general category into which these kinds of things fall, but they're very different.
Mm-hmm.
And
so mediation is like a negotiation. Like a great example, most people, I would think, encounter a mediation in a divorce, probably more in any other context. Is that probably true? Probably,
although they're all, most nowadays in Texas, particularly in Harris County, most contested lawsuits, civil lawsuits, go to a mediation before trial. The judges want the parties to mediate to see if they can settle. And sort of, it's a way for an experienced lawyer or former judge who's a mediator to sort of break through the lawyer adversarial process and sort of talk to the client, although the client's lawyers are there, and just say, you need to understand this, or wouldn't you rather be free of this lawsuit, or here's some issues you can get resolved. And so most cases now that are in the trial courts in Houston particularly, both federal and state, go to mediation before the trial. And if they don't settle, then the trial gets scheduled, you go forward. Arbitrations, sometimes there are mediations in there, but the arbitration is the substitute for the trial itself. It's just outside the normal courts, and it's by private lawyers who are often professional arbitrators, and they render a decision. Sometimes it's a single arbitrator, sometimes a panel.
Yeah, and both parties basically sign agreeing documents at the beginning that it will be a binding arbitration.
That's right. That's often in the contract. Now, sometimes people have a dispute, and afterwards they say, well, let's go arbitrate it instead of going to the courts. But more often, arbitrations arise out of contracts which have specific arbitration clauses. and they may have various kinds of bells and whistles that specify where the arbitration takes place, or what law will be applied, or what agency or organization that has rules is the one conducting the arbitration. There are different associations and groups. For example, the American Arbitration Association, which has different rules for different kinds of arbitration. The London Court of International Arbitration, the Center for Dispute Resolution. There are different groups that people may go to. And
so
they can put that in the contract.
Would you say most cases now they try to start with mediation, and if that doesn't work, they go to arbitration? No, it's either arbitration or a court, right? It's usually not one and then the other. It's one or the other.
Right. It's usually either a mediation in the course of being in the courts, and you'll mediate, and if you don't settle, you go on to your trial, or an arbitration, and they're much less frequently mediations prior to arbitrations, because what generally happens is arbitrations are more frequently between companies, although, for example, if you've got a problem with your stockbroker, there's the arbitration process for that, and they may have mediated settlement conferences beforehand as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there are mediations in matters that are being arbitrated. I think they're less frequent.
What do you think about these as alternatives, dispute resolutions? What's your thoughts
I
on
think
them?
mediations are useful. I've been involved in a number of them as an advocate, and I've also mediated, I guess, a half a dozen cases, and some of them are just so thorny because you've got so many parties. Having a mediation helps because you get everybody together at one time, and sometimes you've got multiple defendants, and you may be collecting a pot for settlement from several defendants of varying degrees of risk or liability. I think arbitrations can be useful when they're very technical matters, and you then have, instead of a judge who may not know anything about the industry or a jury that may not know anything about the industry, some people with a little more specialized expertise and maybe more time to consider all the documents involved. But I do not believe that arbitration is cheaper. It's been presented as being cheaper and faster. I don't think it's necessarily faster, and I don't believe it's cheaper because, quite frankly, unlike the court system where the judge is being paid by the taxpayers, in arbitration you're paying not only for your expert witnesses, you're paying for the arbitrators. You're paying their fees. So,
and meanwhile, you still have all the same elements of a court trial.
That's right, although the rules of evidence may be a little bit more relaxed in an arbitration, depending. But I think arbitration is suited for very large commercial disputes that have some particularly that have an international flavor to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But many companies now have arbitration clauses in their standard contracts. That's something that somebody decided to do at some point in the past, and whether that's a good idea is something that probably should be revisited every so often. Many companies added arbitration clauses 10 or 20 years ago because they thought that Texas juries and the Texas courts were too friendly to plaintiffs. I don't think anybody would say that now, and frankly, I'd rethink whether an arbitration clause is a good idea if I'm a Texas company doing business primarily in Texas or nearby.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I want to thank you as always. Lee Kaplan does a great job, and his firm is, I think, is really an incredible player out there in the litigation arena, and you can learn more about them at Smizer, Kaplan, and Veselka at skv.com. Thanks so much, Lee.
All right.
I look forward to having you on again soon.
Look forward to it.
When we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, the best content here shows up over there at usdatareview.com, and this is The Price of Business.